Like Mr. Escobar said, they were on scene for approximately, the evidence is going to show, the officers were on the scene for 22 minutes before there was another accident. On the highway, they put out no flares.
Whoa, hold on. The prosecution starts with a massive accusation right out the gate: police negligence. No flares for over 20 minutes? That's not just a detail. That's the defense's entire strategy being teed up by the state. This case is already more complicated than a simple speed.
Y'all were given an oath downstairs, and that was a general oath, but I need to give you an oath for this specific case. So if each of you will raise your right hand for me, please. Do each of you solemnly swear and affirm in the case of the state versus Alexander Castro, you will a true verdict render according to the law and evidence, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, you can lower your hand. State, thank you. State, do you have any opening statements?
Yes.
All right, you may proceed.
On July 22nd of 2022, Alexandra Cyber was heading home. She had just spent the day with her boyfriend, Josh. They went golfing, they went out to dinner, they went back to Josh's apartment and watched a movie. Her home was her parents' house. In order to get there, she had to go north on 281. While she was on 281, she ran into traffic. Traffic as far as the eye could see. You're going to hear from Officer Morgan. He's a 3-year San Antonio Police Department officer. He was responding to the cause of the traffic. It was a car crash that happened further north on 281. Now, while responding to this car crash, Officer Morgan was notified of another car crash. It happened further south on 281. He was in his patrol vehicle, he got out, and he started walking over. But then he started running because he saw several cars that were very damaged. He ended up talking to 2 of the drivers of those damaged cars. One of those drivers was the defendant, Alexander Castro. Now, while talking to the defendant, Officer Morgan noticed a third vehicle that had been heavily damaged. It was a little further south. He ran. Inside that car was Alexandra Seibert. She was unconscious. She had an open head wound. She was bleeding heavily. She never woke up from that. EMS came and took her to University Hospital, and Officer Morgan began his part of the investigation. Now, Officer Morgan's a patrol officer. Whenever there's a potentially fatal crash, patrol officers have to call SAPD's Traffic Investigation Division. They're the experts when it comes to car crashes. They can recreate, they can figure out how.
This is a huge admission from the prosecution. They're openly telling the jury their own witness messed up big time by admitting this up front. They're trying to control the narrative and say, yes, our cop failed, but don't let that distract you from the defendant's actions. It's a risky preemptive strike.
How this happened. Officer Morgan didn't have any eyewitnesses who could directly say exactly what happened. So all of the drivers that were involved were kept at the scene so that they can talk to TID. But Officer Morgan made a mistake. TID told him to follow up. He didn't. While conducting his investigation, he spoke with the defendant several times. You're going to hear that. He asked why things happened. You're going to hear what the defendant had to say.
Stop it. Get some help.
TID eventually realized that there was no follow-up. So several hours after, they made the scene, spoke to the drivers, and began their investigation. You're going to hear from several of the witnesses, several of the people who were on the highway when this happened. They did not see what happened. One of the witnesses was involved. His car was half crushed in due to the defendant's car hitting him at a high speed. You're going to hear from several 911 callers who saw the traffic, who saw the long line, and decided to exit. because that's how far away you could see this. They had enough time to exit. One of the 911 callers saw the defendant's vehicle speed down 281, approaching all the cars that were waiting there in traffic. He didn't see the accident, but he saw the debris fly in the air. He heard the actual crash. You're going to hear from now Sergeant Martinez. She was a detective at the time with TID. She was the primary detective that was investigating this case. She looked at the roadway evidence. She looked at data from both Alexandra's car and the defendant's car. And she was able to calculate and figure out exactly how fast the defendant was going. He was going over 90 miles per hour. He never hit his brakes. He never made any attempt to avoid any of the cars that were so vulnerable there. State's asking you to listen to the evidence. Just think about what we're presenting. Officer Morgan was disciplined for what happened, for not following up. He was also disciplined for not further investigating. And you'll hear from him why that happened, what happened there. But don't let that failure on Officer Morgan's part cloud you and how reckless the defendant's actions were. So the state's asking you, again, to listen and to judge how reckless his actions were that night.
Defense, any opening statements?
No, ma'am, proceed.
Yes.
Thank you, Judge. Oh, yeah.
Okay, here's the twist. The defense doesn't just argue the case. They introduce a whole new character, Shayna Lasso, the first domino. This is a classic and powerful defense strategy. Causation. They're arguing the tragic outcome was set in motion by a chain of events a defendant didn't start. But do you buy it? Can someone else's recklessness excuse your own? Comment below.
This case is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. We have to acknowledge that up front. It is a tragedy. And Alexandra Saber lost her life as a result of this tragedy. But this tragedy is not a crime. And I'm going to tell you why it's not a crime. And I can agree with some things that Mr. Escobar said, but I disagree with others. I'm going to tell you the whole story about what happened that night. Because I tell you what, I didn't mention that name. Shayna Alassal. You're not going to hear her come as a witness. No criminal case filed against her. But Shayna Alassal is the first domino that caused this chain reaction where Alex drove into a scene of a crash. Shayna Alassal, you're going to see, evidence is going to show that Shayna Alassal argued with her husband. Shayna Alassal drank. Shayna Alassal drove the wrong way on Highway 281. She drove the wrong way up the exit ramp on 281 and had a collision with a vehicle. Shayna Alassal was driving the wrong way on the highway. But for the conduct of Shayna Alassal, the truth is, but for the conduct of Shayna Alassal, Alexandra Siebert wouldn't have been sitting on the highway, parked in that long line of traffic that Mr. Escobar talked about. Alexandra Siebert, nice, would still be here. She wouldn't have been sitting in the traffic, but for the conduct of Shayna Alassal. Now, she's not here. She wasn't arrested. Shayna Alassal was driven home to meet her husband that she'd argued with by the police. And I hope she's watching today. I hope she's watching and listening to this, because she's not here to answer for what she did that put that man in the chair there, where the state is trying to convict him of killing somebody. Now, was he driving too fast? Yes, but he was driving too fast on the right way, going the right way down the highway. So that's the first thing. The state talked about causation in the PowerPoint, in the voir dire. And they said, but for the conduct of him. That's what they have to prove, but for the conduct of him, Alex. Ms. Seibert would still be alive. but it's but for the conduct of her. But it's not just her. We're not just blaming Shayna Alassal, even though she did get drunk, drive the wrong way on the highway, have a collision, then get driven home by the police. Mr. Escobar talked about the police. Now, they do a difficult job. I used to be a police officer. Dealing with a scene like that is difficult, but they have got a responsibility. The police officers at the scene are the second domino in this chain of events that leads to the unfortunate death of Miss Siebert, because they've got a duty to protect. They've got a duty to warn. And like Mr. Escobar said, they were on scene for approximately, the evidence is going to show, the officers were on the scene for 22 minutes before there was another accident. On the highway, they put out no flares. Everybody's seen an accident on the highway where the police put out flares. They didn't put a police vehicle in the way. They didn't call one of their buddies on the radio to say, hey man, can you go and protect the scene? It says some flashing lights so people don't crash into them. Do any of that. No one put on a luminous bright green jacket to say, hey, slow down, slow down. No one did any of that. Now we talk about the definition of recklessness. That's what Alex is charged with. What the police officers did at the scene is the definition of recklessness. It just is, it's the truth. Because you've got to know about a risk. You've got to know about a risk, and then you've got to consciously disregard it. How do we know the officers consciously disregarded a risk that they know about? It's in their policy and procedure manual. And you're going to hear it from the sergeant who used to be a detective. It's one of the basic policies that the police have. One of the first things they do is warn. You go to the scene of an accident and you warn. You make it safe. They didn't do that. They just got focused in on the first accident while traffic was building up.
This is the defense going on the offensive hard. They're accusing the prosecution of trying to sneak in an intoxication manslaughter case without the evidence to prove it. They're telling the jury, don't be emotionally manipulated by the tragedy. Look at the law. It's a bold move to frame the state as the ones being deceptive.
Building up for 20 minutes. Now, he might have been driving too fast, but he was driving the right way on the highway. Shayna Alassal wasn't. She's the first but for. The officers are the second but for. Now let's talk about Alex. Let me talk about Alex Castro. Talk about him. And it's going to happen throughout this trial. And I want you to watch out for it, please. State is trying to turn this into an intoxication manslaughter case. And it's not. He was out for 8 hours before this accident. And you're going to hear from him. You're going to hear from him on the videos, talking to the officers. He said, I had 4 beers earlier, man, at the driving range. 8 hours before this happened. They're trying to turn this into an intoxication manslaughter case, and it's not. And they're trying to do that because recklessness is presumed. And they can't prove it. Don't let them do it. It is not. Don't let them play on your emotions so that you turn it into that. It's not. He's got to be judged on whether he was reckless or not. What does reckless mean? Remember what we said about reckless. Reckless is you know of a risk. You know of a risk, and then you say, no, I consciously disregard it, which means I know that traffic is stopped. Traffic is at a standstill in front of me. And this is where we're going to ask you, this is why we picked you guys. This is why I'm glad
Yeah, boy.
you're on the jury. Because we're going to ask you to use your common sense when you look at this evidence. Because apply your common sense to this. What the state is saying in this charge, this is why he has to be not guilty.
This back and forth is so heated the court has to stop and give a lecture on professionalism. This tells you everything about how contentious this trial is going to be. The defense is pushing the boundaries of opening statements, and the state is objecting to every step. The battle lines are drawn, and the judge is putting everyone on notice.